Once in a faraway village, there lived a girl named Osara. She was blind, and her family had abandoned her when she was just a little child. They said she was useless, claiming, "What can a blind girl do?" So, they left her in a small, broken hut at the edge of the village. The hut was old and shaky, as if it could collapse with just a gust of wind. Inside, it was empty except for a mat on the dusty floor. Each day, Osara sat there, hungry and cold, with no one to care for her. Sometimes, kind villagers would come by, bringing her some food. "Here, Osara," they would say, offering her little things like pieces of yam, a small bowl of soup, or a handful of beans. Some women even helped her bathe and brought her old clothes. "May the gods watch over you," they would whisper. Osara couldn't see their faces, but she recognized them by their scent and the sound of their voices. Her world was dark, but her heart remained light. Whenever someone helped her, she would smile and say, "Thank you. May the gods bless you." Most days, however, Osara was alone. She would sit in her hut, listening to the sounds of the village. Children playing, women pounding yam, and men laughing by the palm wine stand. She wished she could see it all, but all she had was darkness. So, Osara's life continued, lonely, hungry, and forgotten by the family that should have loved her. Yet, even in her suffering, she remained kind and grateful for the little she had. Her story was just beginning. In the same village where Osara lived, there was a man named Dek. He was big and strong, with arms like tree trunks and a chest as broad as a drum, but Dek had a bad heart, and everyone in the village knew it. He was always causing trouble, sneaking around and doing things that made people shiver. Dek liked to touch girls inappropriately. He would pass by them and grab their arms, pinch their cheeks, or pat their backs too low. The girls felt scared and ashamed, but Dek didn't care. He would laugh and say, "What's wrong? I'm just being friendly." But everyone knew Dek's friendliness was dangerous. One day, Abu, the daughter of the palm wine tapper, was coming back from the stream, carrying a heavy pot of water on her head. Her feet were bare, and her steps were slow under the weight of the water. Just as she was about to pass, Dek stepped in front of her with a smirk on his face. "Abu, don't you look pretty today?" he said, blocking her path. Abu tried to step around him, but he wouldn't let her pass. Suddenly, he reached out, pressing against her back and touching her chest. Abu's pot almost fell as she stumbled back, her cheeks hot with shame, tears filling her eyes as she ran all the way home, leaving Dek behind, laughing like a wicked crow. When Abu told her father, he was furious. "Dek cannot get away with this," he shouted, grabbing his cane and marching straight to Dek's hut. The whole village gathered, whispering, "It's about time someone stopped Dek." But when Abu's father confronted Dek, the mischievous man was ready. With one swift move, Dek grabbed the old man's cane and threw him to the ground. "Next time, I'll do worse," Dek threatened, his voice as cold as the night. After that, the villagers knew they had to protect their daughters. Mothers warned their girls, "Stay far from Dek. If you see him, turn away." Even the village elders were afraid, unwilling to challenge Dek's strength and temper. Dek walked around with pride, thinking no one could stop him. As a result, his shadow grew darker, and his bad deeds spread fear in the hearts of the villagers. Despite all this, Osara grew older, and though her world remained dark, she blossomed into a beautiful young woman. Her face was smooth like the morning river, and her smile, when she laughed, could light up even the gloomiest heart. However, her beauty was hidden beneath old, torn clothes and unkempt hair. As Osara continued to navigate her dark world, her kindness and gratitude shone brightly in contrast to the shadows surrounding her. In a village filled with both light and darkness, Osara's spirit remained unbroken, and her story was destined for change. The villagers, witnessing her resilience, began to see the strength in her heart, and they started to rally around her. They realized that even in the darkest of times, there was hope, and perhaps, together, they could bring light back to their village. If you've made it this far, I encourage you to like and subscribe to the channel to continue enjoying fascinating content like this. Your support is very important to us. That hung like dry grass around her face. One sunny afternoon in the village, a kind-hearted woman named Inchi came to visit Osara. "My child," Inchi said softly, "today we will make you feel like the queen you are." Inchi brought warm water and soap, gently bathing Osara as a mother would her child. She combed Osara's hair, twisting it into neat braids, and dressed her in a beautiful wrapper. Finally, she opened a basket and brought out some roasted yam and palm oil. "Eat, my dear," Inchi said, smiling. "You deserve to be happy." For the first time in a long while, Osara laughed. Her voice was like the sweet song of a bird after the rain, and her face glowed with beauty now clear for all to see. "Thank you, Inchi," blind Osara said, her heart full of gratitude. But not everyone who saw Osara that day had a kind heart. A man passing by stopped in his tracks. From the bushes, he watched as Inchi cared for Osara. His eyes narrowed as he took in the blind girl's radiant beauty for the first time. "She's beautiful," Dek muttered to himself, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "I must have her." That night, Dek lay on his mat, unable to sleep. Osara's laughter echoed in his mind, and the memory of her glowing skin filled his thoughts. His desire grew like a fire that refused to be quenched. "I must make her mine," he whispered, his voice low and dangerous. Before the night grew too deep, Dek went to the village food cellar and bought a hot meal. He made his way to Osara's hut, carrying the food in his hands. When he arrived, Osara, sitting quietly in the dark, was surprised to hear his voice. "Osara, it's me, Dek," he said, pretending to be kind. "I brought you some food." Osara smiled. "Thank you, Dek. May the gods bless you." She ate the food, grateful for his generosity, but as soon as she finished, Dek's voice changed. "You're welcome, Osara," he said, his tone cold. Then, without warning, he covered her mouth with his hand. Osara struggled. Her small frame was no match for Dek's strength. "Please no," she tried to cry out, but her voice was muffled. Dek ignored her pleas and took advantage of the poor blind girl, leaving her crying and broken on the bare floor of her old hut. Osara's tears fell like rain as she cursed Dek with all the pain in her heart. "May the gods judge you," she cried out into the night. But Dek, mischievous as he was, didn't care. He had done this to many other girls, even those with eyes, and nothing had happened. No one had found out, and the curses meant nothing to him because he felt just fine as always. No curse from the girls had ever befallen him, but the gods do not sleep, and Dek's evil would not go unpunished. Osara couldn't stay in the village any longer. Her heart was heavy, and her spirit was crushed. That night, as the village slept under the watch of the moon, Osara took her walking stick and set out. She stumbled along the narrow paths, her bare feet feeling the cold earth beneath them. Each step was a struggle. She fell many times, scraping her knees and hands on the rough ground, but Osara didn't stop. "I must leave this place," she whispered, her voice shaky with fear and pain. The forest was silent except for the sound of her stick tapping the ground. Suddenly, she heard footsteps. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. A gentle voice answered, "It's me, Koi. I'm a traveler passing through." Koi stepped closer and saw Osara, her face streaked with tears and her clothes torn. "What are you doing out here alone at night?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Through her sobs, Osara told him everything, about her blindness, her abandonment, and the evil Dek had done to her. Koi's heart ached for her. "Don't cry, Osara," he said softly. "You don't have to suffer alone anymore. I will take you far away from here." With gentle hands, Koi helped her up and led her through the forest. Together, they left the village behind, stepping into a new chapter of Osara's life. Years passed, and Dek was no longer the proud man he used to be. He had fled the village, settling in a new place where no one knew his dark past. There, he married, hoping to start a new life. But the shadows of his previous actions trailed behind him, waiting for the right moment to catch up, reminding him that no one can escape the consequences of their deeds forever. As Osara began to heal and build a new life filled with kindness and love, the world slowly opened up for her, filled with hope and the promise of a brighter future. I hope you enjoyed this amazing trip. Subscribe and don't miss our next video. See you next time.